Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today and for your service. Very much appreciated at this time. I expressed yesterday a great deal of skepticism about the strategy of arming the so-called Syrian moderates. I have this sinking feeling that we're already violating things that we know to be true, like starting with the idea that it's generally historically a bad idea to get involved in a religiously oriented land war in the Middle East. I still have yet to receive an answer to the question of how a lightly trained force will fight two enemies at once. Ambassador Crocker, you may be right that we'll be able to convince a bunch of 19-year-olds who are seething with hatred towards President Assad that what they really ought to do is go after ISIS. I'm not convinced. I'm also very, very concerned that while we all violently agree that we must not be seen as acting alone here, in the eyes of the Arab street and on the screens of our television, you will see U.S. aircraft, U.S. Drones, U.S. airstrikes, and the one force on the ground in Syria will be a U.S.-branded proxy army, maybe in a region where hundreds of years of history shows that plans generally go wrong. Maybe this one will go right. I don't know. The truly discouraging thing here, though, is that the discussion, and this is why I really appreciate your presence, has to date largely been limited to airstrikes alone will not do it. We need ground troops. But clearly, the experience in Afghanistan and Iraq would suggest that those two things alone don't do the trick of achieving victory, degrading, destroying, all these words that we use. You're here to tell us that this needs to be accompanied by cutting off the money, diplomacy, economic, political change in these societies. Dr. Rand, maybe I'll start with you. Is there a single model, maybe since the 1920s with Kemal Ataturk in Turkey, is there a single model that suggests that we can achieve the liberalization, social, economic, where sectarian fights can be ended and a true stable nation state can emerge? Is there, in the last 90 years, can we point to a country where all of what you call for has actually achieved the objective that we know to be essential to the defeat of these people?
Thank you very much. This is a great question, and I appreciate you raising the issue of the longer-term viability of liberalization and security in some of these states. In terms of the historical question, I would point to periods of liberalization in the Arab and Muslim world dating back to the 1920s, to the post-independence period. There were nationalist movements that have arisen all over the Arab world that have fought coherently, not on the basis of tribe, not on the basis of sect, anti-colonial movements. So there are examples of instances where folks have put aside their differences, whether religious, secular tensions or sectarian tensions, to try to build nation state and build institutions.
Which can just specifically?
Sure. There was Egyptian liberation movements. There was North African anti-colonial movements in the 1950s and 1960s.
But isn't it fair to say those have really been the exception to the rule, and those have lasted 10, 15, maybe 20 years tops?
Maybe the impetus towards liberalization movements have lasted that short time, but the drive towards a national state identity has endured in many of these places.
Let me ask a similar and related question, Ambassador Crocker. I'd love to bring you in here. Societal change, without which this is not going to work, is going to presumably require the assent and the cooperation of the leaders involved here. Syria, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, just to get to the core here, is there any evidence that any of the leaders of any of those countries are on board with the idea that there should be political and economic change, the kind of political and economic change that you're calling for?
A very, very important question, Congressman. And let's face it, and no one knows better than this committee, there is nothing easy about any part of what we're dealing with. Among the hard questions is taking a look at our regional allies. Virtually, well, all of them are monarchies, and if the Egyptians come in, you can add one autocracy. So what do we do? Do we put primacy on building a coalition with those who have supported us in the past? Or do we put primacy on affecting change in their societies as we deal with a hot war against what I consider an existential enemy of the United States? Hard questions. Fortunately, I no longer have to answer them. I can just sit here and opine.
Well, today you do.
My vote would be you work with the partners who will work with you and who have historically been allied with you. Part of the tragedy we're facing, as Dr. Rand notes, there were these movements, principally post-World War I, in most cases, but they did not prevail. The monarchies did not prevail. The so-called republics that succeeded the monarchies in places like Egypt and Iraq in the 50s did not prevail. The fragility of the Arab state system cannot be understated. Oddly enough, the strongest states, the most stable states right now, are the monarchies, the same ones that fell in the 50s. So again, we're just going to have to make some hard choices here as the world's leading democracy, but also as the country that has to lead the fight against an enemy that would love to get to Western targets.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe that's a good